The lawyer's hand was shaking when he passed me the envelope. I noticed that before I noticed anything else. His fingers trembled like he was handing me something that could burn him. My mother saw it too, and before I could even read my own name written across the front in my father's handwriting, she reached across the table and pressed her palm flat against mine. "Don't open that here, Claire," she said, her voice sweet the way poison is sweet. "It's nothing. Just some old paperwork your father never got around to throwing out. Put it away." Nothing. That's what she called it. But I had spent 38 years learning the difference between my mother's voice when she meant something, and her voice when she was hiding something. And this was the second one. My brother Daniel leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a smirk already forming on his face. The same smirk he'd worn since we were children, the one that said he already knew he'd won, and I hadn't even realized we were playing a game. My sister Renee didn't even look at me. She was too busy admiring the new watch she'd just found out she'd inherited, turning her wrist under the light of the study, as if our father's body wasn't still warm in a funeral home across town. I want you to understand something before the story goes any further. I'm not a bitter woman by nature. I spent 11 years as a hospice nurse, which means I have held the hands of strangers while they took their last breath. And I have told families things they did not want to hear with as much gentleness as the truth allows. I know what real loss looks like. I know what grief does to people, but nothing prepared me for what happened in that lawyer's office on the afternoon of my father's funeral, when the man who built an entire life around discipline and fairness left behind a will that gave my brother the house, gave my sister the investment accounts, gave my mother control of everything else, and gave me a single sealed envelope that everyone in that room seemed desperate for me to throw away. If you're new to this channel, welcome to Legacy Whisper, where we tell the true shape of family inheritance and the secrets people bury to protect their own comfort. Before we go further into what was inside that envelope and what it cost me to open it, hit that subscribe button, because what happened over the next 6 months changed not just my life, but the truth of everything I thought I knew about my father. And I promise you, the ending of the story is not what you expect. My name is Claire Whitfield, and until the day of my father's funeral, I believed I understood my family. I was the middle child, sandwiched between Daniel, who was groomed from birth to take over my father's construction company, and Renee, who was dotted on simply for being the baby, the pretty one, the one who never had to try. I was the one who got good grades and was told that was expected. I was the one who took care of my father during the last 18 months of his illness, driving 45 minutes each way after 12-hour hospital shifts to make sure he took his medication, to sit with him when the pain got bad, to listen to him talk about regrets he never fully explained. Daniel visited twice a month, always with an excuse ready before he even walked in the door. Renee visited even less, but she always managed to leave with something: a check, a piece of jewelry, an old watch that had been my grandfather's. I never resented them for that, not really. I told myself, family isn't a ledger. I told myself, love doesn't need to be measured out evenly to be real. I remembered being 9 years old, watching my father come home covered in drywall dust after a 16-hour day, and how he would still sit at the kitchen table and ask me, specifically me, how my science project was coming along, even when he was too tired to keep his eyes open through dinner. Daniel got the trucks and the tools and the trips to job sites on Saturday mornings, groomed early to inherit a business he didn't yet understand the weight of. Renee got the soft voice, the extra dessert, the benefit of every doubt simply because she smiled the right way at the right moment. I got the quiet nod across the table that told me my father noticed things other people didn't bother noticing. I told myself that nod was enough. For 30 years, I believed it was. But sitting in that office, watching my mother slide a folder of legal documents toward Daniel like she'd been waiting years to do it, watching Renee's diamond earrings catch the light while she pretended to dab away tears that never came, I felt something shift in my chest. Something that had been quiet for a long time was suddenly wide awake. The lawyer, a soft-spoken older man named Mr. Halloran, who had known my father for over 20 years, cleared his throat and continued reading. The house on Maple Ridge, valued at just under $1 million, to Daniel. The investment portfolio, just over $600,000, to Renee. Full control of remaining liquid assets and the family checking accounts to my mother, Diane Whitfield. And then, almost as an afterthought, he said my name. To my daughter Claire, he read, his voice softening in a way I didn't understand at the time. I leave this sealed envelope, to be opened only by her, in private. When she is ready. That was it. No house, no money, no mention of the years I'd spent by his bedside, holding his hand while he cried about pain. He wouldn't name. Just an envelope, thin enough that I could feel there wasn't much inside. It, sealed with a strip of tape that looked like it had been applied by hands that were no longer steady. Daniel didn't even try to hide his relief. Well, he said, standing up and straightening his jacket. Guess that settles that. Renee actually laughed. A short, surprised laugh. Like she'd been holding her breath the whole meeting and could finally let it out. My mother squeezed my hand one more time. That same too sweet pressure. Don't make a scene, Claire. Your father wasn't in his right mind those last few months. We all know that. Just let it go. I sat there in that leather chair, the envelope resting in my lap like it weighed more than it should have. And I felt 38 years of being the reasonable one, the understanding one, the one who didn't make waves. Crack right down the middle. I didn't open it that night. I want to be honest with you about that. I drove home to my small two-bedroom apartment, the one I could barely afford on a nurse's salary, and I set the envelope on my kitchen table and stared at it while I ate cold leftovers standing up at the counter. Some part of me was afraid of what my mother said, that it truly was nothing. That opening it would only confirm what the rest of my family already believed. That in the final accounting of my father's life, I simply hadn't mattered as much as the others. But another part of me, a part that had been quiet for so long, almost didn't recognize its voice, kept whispering that my mother had never once in her life called anything nothing unless it was actually something enormous she needed me to ignore. 3 days passed. I went back to work. I held the hand of a dying man named Arthur, who reminded me, in small ways, of my own father. The same stubborn jaw, the same refusal to complain even when the pain was clearly unbearable. On my lunch break, sitting alone in my car in the hospital parking lot, I finally broke the seal. Inside was a single key, small and brass, the kind used for old safety deposit boxes, and a folded letter in my father's handwriting. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set the key down in the cup holder before I could even unfold the paper. Claire, the letter began. If you are reading this, then I am gone. And I need you to understand something I was never brave enough to tell you while I was alive. Everything I am about to tell you is true, and none of it is meant to hurt you. It is meant to protect you, the way I should have protected you a long time ago. I remember reading that first line 4 times before I could make myself continue. There is a particular kind of fear that comes from realizing the person you trusted most in the world had a secret they carried in silence for years. A fear that settles into your stomach before your mind even understands what the secret is. The letter explained that 30 years ago, before Daniel and Renee were born, my father had been the sole owner of a small architectural firm that nearly collapsed during a recession. To save it, he had taken out a private loan from a business partner named Walter Kim, a quiet, meticulous man who believed in my father's talent when the banks did not. That loan came with an agreement. If my father's company ever succeeded beyond a certain point, 20% of all future profits, in perpetuity, would belong to Walter's family. My father agreed, desperate, certain the company would never grow large enough for the number to matter. He was wrong. The company grew into what eventually became Whitfield Construction, worth tens of millions of dollars by the time my father retired. The very company Daniel had just inherited full control of that afternoon. And Walter Kim, before he died quietly a decade earlier, had done something my father never expected. He had forgiven the debt entirely, on one condition, written into a private legal agreement that predated my father's will by 15 years. The 20% ownership stake would transfer, upon Walter's death, into a trust intended not for my father's company as an entity, but for whichever of my father's children showed. In Walter's words, the character my old friend Warren once had. Before success made him forget where he came from. My father had never told anyone about this trust. Not my mother, not Daniel, not Renee. He had watched, quietly, for years, which of his children would prove worthy of it, and 3 months before he died, in a private meeting with Mr. Halloran that no one else in the family knew had taken place, he made his final decision. He signed the paperwork transferring Walter Kim's dormant 20% ownership stake in Whitfield Construction directly to me. I had to pull my car over because my hands wouldn't stop shaking enough to keep driving. The letter continued. My father wrote that he had watched me drive 45 minutes each way to sit with him during the worst of his illness, watched me give up vacation days and sleep and my own peace of mind, without once asking for anything in return. He wrote that he had watched Daniel visit only when it was convenient, always angling conversations toward the future of the company, always subtly asking questions about succession plans dressed up as concern. He wrote that he had watched Renee's visits shrink to nothing the moment she realized there was no more jewelry left to inherit early. And he wrote, in words that broke something open in my chest, that he was sorry. Sorry that he had let the visible parts of the will make it look like I had been forgotten. Because he needed the family to believe the envelope was worthless long enough for the real transfer to be finalized quietly, protected from any legal challenge Daniel or my mother might try to bring. They will be angry, Claire, he wrote. Your mother has never respected quiet strength. She only respects loud claims to things. Daniel will see this as theft, even though it was never his to lose. But I need you to understand that the company he inherited was never worth what he believes it's worth. Not fully. Not without what Walter left behind. Use the key. Go to First Heritage Bank on Larkspur Avenue. Ask for box 214. What you find there will change how you see everything, including me. I did not go straight home that day. I drove to First Heritage Bank with my hands still trembling on the wheel, the small brass key gripped so tightly in my palm that it left a mark on my skin. The woman at the front desk barely looked up when I gave her the box number, as if people walked in clutching mysterious keys from dead fathers every day of the week. Inside box 214 was a folder of original legal documents bearing Walter Kim's signature, a formal notarized letter confirming the trust transfer, and something I did not expect at all, a stack of old photographs. My father, younger than I had ever seen him, standing beside a man I didn't recognize outside a small, unimpressive office building with a hand-painted sign that read Whitfield Architectural Design. On the back of one photograph, in handwriting that wasn't my father's, someone had written, "To Warren for believing when no one else did. Watch over this the way I watched over you." Duck. I sat in that cold little viewing room at the bank for almost an hour, holding those photographs, understanding for the first time that my father's entire empire had been built on a debt of trust between two men, one of whom had quietly decided, from beyond the grave, that I was the only one of his children worth trusting with the truth. When I finally told my family what I had found, 3 weeks later, at a meeting, I insisted Mr. Halloran arrange formally, so there could be no confusion or denial. The room turned cold in a way I will never forget. Daniel's face went white, then red. "This is insane," he said, standing so fast his chair scraped hard against the floor. "There's no way Dad would sign away 20% of the company without telling me. I run that business. I built half of what it is today. You inherited a business that was already worth what it's worth because of a debt you never knew existed," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. 20% was never yours to build on top of. It was Walter's, and then it was Dad's promise to give it to whichever of us actually showed up when it mattered. My mother's reaction was the one that hurt the most, even though I told myself I was prepared for it. She looked at me the way you look at a stranger who has wandered uninvited into your home. "You've always been jealous of your brother," she said quietly. "Don't do this to this family, Claire. Don't tear us apart over money. I'm not the one who called an envelope with my name on it nothing before I even had the chance to open it," I said. "You knew. Maybe not the details, but you knew Dad had done something, and you wanted me to throw it away before I ever found out what it was." She didn't deny it. That silence told me more than any confession could have. What followed was not simple, and I won't pretend it was. Daniel hired lawyers, the expensive kind, the kind who bill by the quarter hour and know how to draw a fight out until the other side gives up out of exhaustion. There were months of legal back and forth, appraisals, forensic accountants combing through 30 years of company records to verify the original loan agreement and Walter Kim's subsequent transfer of rights. My brother called me twice during that stretch, and both times his voice carried the same cold, clipped tone he used to use on subcontractors who missed a deadline. "You understand what you're doing to this family," he said the second time, not really a question. "You understand Mom can't afford to lose the house if this drags the company's value down in a legal mess." I told him I wasn't trying to take anything from him that was ever his. I told him I was only asking for what our father had already decided belonged to me, long before either of us had a say in it. He hung up without responding. During that time, I kept working my hospice shifts, kept holding the hands of dying strangers, kept coming home to an apartment that suddenly felt very small compared to the number now attached to my name in legal filings. Some nights I sat at my kitchen table with the cup of tea going cold in front of me, staring at the same spot where the envelope had once rested, and I would ask myself out loud to no one whether any of it was worth the silence that had grown between me and my own blood. There were nights I cried, not because I regretted opening that envelope, but because I realized how much of my life I had spent believing my quiet loyalty didn't count for anything, when, in fact, it had been the one thing my father was watching for the entire time. Long after I had stopped hoping anyone was watching at all, there was one afternoon, near the end of the legal proceedings, when Mr. Halloran called me into his office privately. He set a thin folder on the desk between us, one I hadn't seen before. "Your father asked me to give you this if things ever got difficult," he said quietly. "He wanted you to have his own words, in case theirs weren't enough." Inside was a short note in my father's unsteady handwriting, written near the very end, when his hands had begun to fail him. "Claire," read, "I know they will fight you. I know it will feel like the whole family is against you. But I built everything I have on the belief that quiet, steady people are worth more than loud, hungry ones. Don't let their anger make you doubt what I already knew the moment I signed those papers. You earned this in 100 small afternoons no one else bothered to show up for." I read that note more times than I can count over the following weeks, folded into my coat pocket during depositions, tucked under my pillow on the nights sleep wouldn't come. The documents held up. Every one of them. Walter Kim's original agreement had been airtight, drafted by a lawyer who apparently understood exactly how badly it might one day be contested, and my father's final amendment to formalize the transfer to me had been signed, witnessed, and notarized with a precision that left no legal room for Daniel's challenge to succeed. 6 months after that first meeting in Mr. Halloran's office, I officially became a 20% owner of Whitfield Construction, a company now valued at just over $41 million. I did not gloat. I want to be clear about that, because it would have been easy to. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I used a portion of my new stake to fund a small nonprofit hospice care program in my father's name, the Warren Whitfield Comfort Fund, providing in-home end-of-life care for families who couldn't afford it. The same kind of care I had given him for free during the last 18 months of his life. And the same kind of care I had given strangers for over a decade without anyone ever calling it valuable. Daniel and I still don't speak. Not really. He sold his shares in the company 2 years later, after a series of business decisions that revealed just how much of his early success had quietly depended on Walter Kim's forgotten debt propping up the numbers behind the scenes. Renee reached out once, nearly a year after everything settled, not to apologize, but to ask if I could help her invest a small inheritance she had left. I helped her, because in the end, I decided my father's kindness was worth more to me than my siblings' resentment. My mother and I have found a fragile kind of peace, built slowly, one careful conversation at a time. She admitted to me, months later, over coffee in my new kitchen, that she had known my father was hiding something in his final year, something about an old business partner, something about a debt. She said she assumed it was bad news, some liability that would drag the family down, and she wanted to protect Daniel from it before he even had the full picture. She never imagined it was the opposite. She never imagined. My father had spent his final months quietly making sure the one child who never asked for anything would finally receive what she had earned simply by showing up. There was a moment during that same conversation that I still think about more than almost anything else from that entire year. My mother reached across the table, the way she had reached for my hand in Mr. Halloran's office all those months before, except this time there was no pressure in it, no warning behind her fingers. She just held my hand and said, quietly, "I should have trusted him. I should have trusted you." I didn't say anything back right away. I let the silence sit there between us, because some apologies don't need an immediate answer, they just need to be heard all the way through. Eventually, I told her that I forgave her, and I meant it, because I understood by then that fear makes people protect the wrong things, and grief makes people cling to whatever feels familiar, even when familiar is wrong. I think about that envelope often. I think about how close I came to leaving it sealed on my kitchen table, unopened, out of respect for my mother's insistence that it meant nothing. I think about how many people, in families just like mine, are told to ignore the very thing that would finally show them their own worth, simply because someone else is afraid of what the truth might cost them. I think about my father sitting alone in his study during those final months, weighing 30 years of quiet observation, deciding which of his children had actually shown him who they were when nothing was being offered in return. If there is one thing I want you to take from this story, it is this: the people who tell you not to open the envelope are very often the people who already know exactly what's inside. Trust the quiet parts of your life. Trust the years you spent showing up when no one was watching, because someone was always watching, even if it wasn't the person you expected. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own family, your own quiet years of being overlooked, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments below what you would have done in my place, and if you believe loyalty deserves to be rewarded, even when it takes years to be seen. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. This is Legacy Whisper, and I'll see you in the next story.